Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Tarot Deep Dive into the Hermit, R2 number 9. Now, this is a pretty prolific card for me, personally, because of, because if you look at the etymology of the word hermit, it means man of the desert. And I was born quite literally in a desert. And on top of that, I'm personally a Virgo myself, so the Hermit. So I have a lot of particular synchronicities with this card as of recently. I'm not going to talk about it, but it's a very important card to me, and how it all sort of formulates and how I sort of see it. And I would implore anyone to look at this card, especially with the upcoming blood worm moon. So a worm moon is the last full moon just before spring, and it's when the worms start to aerate the ground. It's a time of fertility, and then with the blood moon, which is new beginnings and like the lunar eclipse and that kind of thing, that's another thing to keep in mind. So it's actually a very very special moon that is happening in just tomorrow. And I think it relates to this card in some way, believe it or not. Okay, without further ado, we are going to get into it. All right, this card is attributed. So, okay, before we do that, I'll just say, yeah. So, the Hermit, illumination from within, secret impulse from within, practical plans derived accordingly, retirement from participation in current events, the property of the eternal, the magus of the voice of power. This card is attributed to the letter Yod, which means the hand. Hence, the hand, which is the tool of or instrument par excellence, is in the center of the picture. The letter Yod is the foundation of all the other letters of the Hebrew alphabet, which are merely combinations of it in various ways. And yeah, you can actually see that with the way each one sort of has a little bit of a, like a little bit of a Yod in the start of it. So basically, the Yod is the spermatozoa that sort of gave rise to the universe. And in regards to the hand, because we actually have opposable thumbs, it actually gives us much greater ability to create than any other being, and that's why it's so important for us. Hands are creative, and having opposable thumbs is like one of the greatest things we've been endowed with as humans. We do some pretty fucked up things with it. Let's put it that way. The letter Yod is the first letter of the name Tetragrammaton, and this symbolizes the Father, who is wisdom. I did not know that. Well, no, I did know that. What am I talking about? But yeah, who is wisdom? He is the highest form of mercy and the Logos, the creator of all worlds. Accordingly, his representative in physical life is the spermatozoon. This is why that card is called the Hermit. Who is wisdom? He is the highest form of Mercury. Sorry, highest form of Mercury. Mercy. Sorry, my bad, guys. But yeah, because Virgo is has Mercury rules Virgo, and it's also exalted therein. So it's a very important card in that respect, because it's mercurial, and Mercury is sort of like that mediation between heaven and earth. And where it all sort of comes from. And that's why the spermatozoon, it's sort of the creative part of it. And if you remember when we were talking about the Lover's card, I'll just go back to here. In the previous one, you'll see that the Hermit over here, he's actually doing the sign of the Enterer, which with a Mobius strip around him, which should actually really be quite prolific for other people. So yeah, and there's the Orphic egg, and then back over here, he's also adoring the Orphic egg, like he's sort of the creator of the opposites and that kind of thing. The soul, being the soul of the world and the universe at large. The figure of the Hermit himself recalls the shape of the letter Yod, and the color of his cloak is the color of Bina, in whom he gestates. In his hand he holds a lamp whose center is the sun, portrayed in the likeness of the sigil of the great king of fire. Yod is the secret fire. It seems that he is contemplating, in a certain sense, adoring the Orphic egg, greenish in color because it is conterminous with the universe, while the snake which surrounds is many colored to signify the iridescence of Mercury, for he is not only creative, but is the fluidic essence of light, which is the life of the universe. Yeah, so there's actually something kind of interesting here in like a creative myth, Aboriginal creative myth for anyone who doesn't know, called the rainbow serpent, which is the primordial creator. And the fact that they in there, where it's sort of the snake is described as iridescent, so is the rainbow serpent, and the fact that there is that common theme with such a disparate culture like Aboriginal folklore is quite incredible, actually. And I think that's why also sometimes the snake is sort of represented as purple, because it's sort of that going up the color scale and until it becomes invisible, and it's sort of the infinite sort of way. Because yeah, in a sense, adorning off a greenish in color, because it is conterminous with the universe. Oh yeah, we just went over that. For he's not only created, but is fluidic essence of light, which is the life of the universe. So, I think goes back into things such as, like music. He can like through speech I create, because in a certain sense it's spermatozoons. Because if you look at sound, it's an oscillating wave, and I think when you think about that, each time you speak, you are giving birth to the universe in some sense, creating the universe as you speak. And it's something I've had trouble with, trying to keep my mouth shut, even talking to myself and all that other kind of thing, because it's something you should probably do more often than not. There we go. So the high symbolism of this card is therefore fertility in its most exalted sense, and this is reflected in the attribution of the card of the sign of Virgo, which is another aspect of the same quality. Virgo is an earthly sign and is referred especially to corn, so that the background of the card is a field of wheat. Yeah, so Virgo is the most feminine form of the star sign, so it's basically water and earth. That's the really important thing to keep in mind. Virgo represents the lowest, most receptive, most feminine form of. There you go. I wasn't even reading ahead, but there you go. And forms the crust over Hades. Not only is Virgo ruled by Mercury, but Mercury is exalted there, and we talked about that. Compare the 10 of discs and the general doctrine that the climax of the descent into matter is the signal for the reintegration by spirit. It is the formula of the princess, the mode of fulfillment of the great work. So, yeah, that's basically how the princess sort of comes into it. And like once everything's descended into matter, then the great work kind of begins in a sense. When something's descended into matter to have experience. And I think that's really important because like we only ever reach Keter by through Malkut, which is like through the kingdom, which is lead, and we transmute that lead into gold. Keter is in Malkut, and Malkut is in Keter, but after another fashion. Here we go. This card recalls the legend of Persephone, and herein is a dogma. Concealed within Mercury is a light which pervades all parts of the universe equally. One of his titles is Psychopompus. It's funny because I've literally called my fucking thing called Psychopompus, my computer called Psychopompus. I gave it a name. So that's kind of weird. The guide of the soul through the lower regions. These symbols are indicated by his serpent wand, which is actually growing out of the abyss, and is the spermatozoon developed as a poison and manifesting the fetus. Following him is Cerberus. Actually, I want to stop there for a second because if you look back at the lovers, it's a purple serpent, right? And one of the really important things is that so there's purple serpents, right? There's 11 of them, and they all have venom, but none of them are poisonous to humans. Maybe somebody could go a bit deeper than that, but from what I gather, it's not lethal enough, which is very interesting. Following him is Cerberus, the three-headed hound of hell, whom he has tamed. In this trump is shewn the entire mystery of life and its most secret workings. Yod, phallus, spermatozoon, hand, logos, virgin. There is perfect identity, not merely equivalence of the extremes, the manifestation, and the method. Okay, we actually went through that quite quickly, but this is a very prolific card for a very because it sort of is the whole center of creation, and the illumination sort of does come from within, as the same way that light came from the darkness through the crust of Hades. When you consider the how the universe manifested and that kind of thing. So let's look at a few things of this. Eye of Will, Hermit, green, yellow, slate grey, plum color. Interest. So Isis as a virgin, Virgo, Isis, mighty mother, the Gopi girls, the Lord of Yoga, worm-eaten corpse. That's a you know how I was just talking about like our worms through the earth. The fact that like one of the 40 Buddhist meditations of worm-eaten corpse is quite interesting. Virgin, anchor, any solitary personal animal, a rhinoceros. Narcissus. Magical weapons, preserve the bread lotus, the scepter. Or aphrodisiacs for the vegetable drugs, magical powers, invisibility, parthenogenesis, initiation. So, I think it's really important to remember what these mean by magical power. So, invisibility just simply means like invisible influences from the universe that happened here, and usually this happens from magicians, and also like musicians, how they're sort of the same thing. They cause like an element of influence that we are not quite aware of. And I think that's sort of the whole point of it. Parthenogenesis, that's sort of just creating two ideas together in one and then giving birth to that. Initiation, and there's a big question mark over the top of it. And it's sort of interesting too, because when you look at Milo DeQuette's sort of yin and yang on his YouTube banner, he's basically got the two question marks, yin and yang, but that's interesting. So correct tarot is wrapped in a cloak and cowl, the ancient walker bearing a lamp and staff. Prophet of the eternal, the magus of the voices of power. The human body, the back. Diseases, spinal weakness, paralysis. I think that just it's interesting because I used to have a really bad back as well. Now that we've gone through that, let's actually now go through the obligatory Milo DeQuette understanding. Mercury rules, Mercury exalted, original design. Yep, we went through that. Wander alone, bearing the light and thy staff, and be the light so bright that no man seeth thee. Be not moved by all without or within. Keep silence in all ways. That's really important, I think, in some ways. Why don't you like my egg question? Is it because you don't know the answer? Harris to Crowley. By now, you are probably tired of hearing me talk about the special virtues inherent in the element Earth. You probably think you've heard enough about how humble Earth is uniquely connected to spirit, and how it helps regenerate the highest high because of the simple fact that it is the lowest low. See chapter 11. And that is a really important thing to think about, because the most high is made up of the most low. So it's sort of like it was a phrase taken out of Moby Dick, where Captain Ahab sort of says, Crowley in one sense is higher than God's hat, but in another sense lower than whale shit. But anyone who knows anything, that God's hat is made of whale shit. And when I'm not going to really get into the whole details of it, but when I think back on my life and considering how far I've gotten into the mysteries, I definitely would have been considered on the sort of the extremely profane level at some point. But the most sacred is made of the most profane as well. And you can see this reflected in systems as well, like power structures. You know how like the people up higher also that seems to be the most biggest massive evil pieces of shit. There you go. Like they're low humans, but they're high up the ladder. Think about that. Just like how some of the most high up people are also on the lowest in terms of the material area of in terms of power, wealth, and all that other kind of thing. So I think that's a really important thing to keep in mind. Well, get ready to hear some more because we are not through yet. As a matter of fact, in the pages that follow, you are going to get some pretty big doses of this doctrinal medicine that Crowley calls the climax of the descent into matter. Why is it so important for you to keep taking this medicine? First of all, because it will help you understand the living nature of tarot. More important, however, because you are the grand climax of the descent into matter. So, yeah, you are. I mean, you are basically the climax of like the masculine and feminine creating the universe in a sense. So, and you're the child. So, think about that. I have tried to organize the material of this book so that by the time you read about the last card of the tarot, the Ten of Discs, you'll be armed with enough occult knowledge to comprehend the great magic that takes place there. It is a process that Crowley calls the mode of fulfillment of the great work. I'm sure you wouldn't do this, but if you were to turn to the back of the book and read what I have written about the Ten of Discs, you would learn, albeit prematurely, that the three key cosmic players are responsible for creating that mode fulfillment of the great work are Earth, Mercury, and the Sun. That shouldn't surprise you, really. After all, Earth is that special lowest of the low element you're getting so tired of hearing about. Tarot is the province of Thoth, Mercury. And I'll just finish that sentence, actually. And the sun is the secret seed of universal life that we knew was going to be so important since we first saw it radiating from in front of the fool's groin. And again, with that whole lowest of low, like what are planets really? Actually, they actually got called wandering stars at one point. Well, that's actually the etymology of it, and the way a star is born is, it's just a lot of matter, Earth being compressed and then causing a chain reaction to then bring about a star. And there's actually some planets in parts of our universe called brown dwarfs, which are planets that never actually formed. Planets that failed to become stars, essentially. Like they're really huge planet and they got a huge mass, but they didn't quite get there. So, Earth, Mercury, and the Sun have their first important strategy meeting in ATU IX, the Hermit. Earth, Mercury, and the Sun have their first important strategy meeting in ATU IX. I think that that's just the mediation between heaven and earth, like I was just saying, like Mercury, like sulfur, salt. It's from like sulfur to Mercury to salt. So basically, since when you consider the fact that man is actually this mediator, and that's why on the 4 powers of the Sphinx, you can see a man, which is air of air, Aquarius, which is just thought, and that's very mercurial. So we are actually, in a sense, this mercurial mediator between heaven and earth, and the Hermit is just this expression of that, of creation, of heaven, then Mercury, and then earth. We are all hermits in a sense, if you can believe it. Just look at how Earth, Mercury, and the Sun come together in the Hermit. He represents the zodiac sign of Virgo. Virgo is the mutable sign of Earth. Virgo is ruled by Mercury, and Mercury is exalted in Virgo. The Hermit carries the lamp of the Sun, with which he gives his light to the world. It's as simple as that. Yeah, that's it. Sending tongue of grace. We've met the Hermit once before as the hooded figure of the officiates in the royal wedding in R26. Yeah, here we go. And lovers. And while he is sexually ambivalent, he is indeed a he and an important expression of male creative energy. The Hebrew letter sacred to Virgo and the Hermit is Yod, the 10th letter, and the first and supreme letter in Yod He Vav He. In a very real way, the tiny flame of Yod is the fundamental Hebrew letter. All the other letters are created from this basic form. We sort of went over that. As the hidden seed of the Hebrew alphabet, Yod also symbolizes the mystery of sperm, the hidden seed, and a central secret of fertilization. See how the hermit stares at the Orphic egg? If I were that egg, I'd be nervous. Crowley writes, Crowley writes, in this Trump is shewn the entire mystery of life in its most secret workings. While, in my opinion, this remains true, we have to remember that Crowley died before the discovery of DNA. That's interesting. And so his understanding of biology was naturally incomplete and based upon obsolete doctrines and theories. There is, however, an abundance of images in this card to handily accommodate more recent scientific discoveries. And it doesn't take a rocket scientist to tell us this card is loaded. Yeah, very much so. Let's see how Harris graphically handles all of this. First of all, the figure of the hermit himself is one big stylized Yod. He sports the ibis head of Thoth Mercury. Holy shit! No way! I did not notice that. He does, sort of, but yeah, I actually didn't. I didn't notice that, so that's really interesting. So that's a really, really important thing, I reckon, because that's actually quite prolific to some of the things that are going on in my life in particular. So I'm glad I picked up on that. The only other visible part is his hand, Yod in Hebrew. He stands in the fertile field of wheat, the heavy-headed shaft suggestive of sperm. He carries the lamp of the sun. He is dogged by Cerberus, the three-headed guardian of the gates of the underworld, whom Hermes Mercury tamed with honeycakes during his mission to rescue Persephone from Hades. Perhaps the most intriguing image on the card is what appears to be a wriggling sperm cell in the lower left corner. Actually, it is the homunculus image. First drawn in 1694 by Nicholas Hartsoeker, a noted advocate of the long discredited theory of reproduction called the principle of spermous performation. If you look closely at the head of the homunculus, you'll see a large-headed baby curled in the fetal position. No way. Damn, they went all out on that. That is really interesting, and that has a lot of implications, actually. While this concept is based upon biologically inaccurate science, it expresses the more universal and magically correct doctrine of correspondence, as above, so below. You may find it rewarding to study the Hermit Trump in conjunction with R215, the devil. All right. Well, that concludes that one. That was quite a ride, I gotta say. I didn't expect to see that level of I guess, detail in such a short amount of words. Anyway, guys, if you enjoyed this this talk, please subscribe to my Substack on YouTube, and I'll see you guys later. Bye.